She saved a billionaire's life. What he did next will move you to tears. Imagine rescuing someone and never expecting to see them again, only for them to change your life in ways you couldn't have dreamed of. This story will leave you questioning what truly matters. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us for more life-changing stories. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, Sarah Matthews hurried down the quiet streets of Millbrook. The small town was just beginning to stir, shopkeepers raising their shutters and early risers heading out for their morning jogs. Sarah, however, was already nearing the end of her shift at St. Mary's Hospital, where she worked as a nurse in the emergency department. The past 12 hours had been grueling, filled with a steady stream of patients ranging from minor injuries to life-threatening conditions. Sarah's feet ached, and her mind longed for the comfort of her bed, but there was a spring in her step. She had always found a deep sense of fulfillment in her work, in the knowledge that each day brought opportunities to make a difference, no matter how small. As she rounded the corner onto Elm Street, a screech of tires shattered the morning calm. Sarah's head snapped up, her tired eyes suddenly alert. A sleek black car swerved violently, its tires leaving angry black marks on the asphalt. Time seemed to slow as the vehicle spun out of control, finally coming to a crashing halt against a sturdy oak tree. For a moment, everything was still. Then, Sarah's training kicked in. She sprinted towards the wreckage, her exhaustion forgotten. As she approached, she could see smoke beginning to curl from under the crumpled hood. "Hello? Can you hear me?" Sarah called out, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She peered through the driver's side window, which had spiderwebbed upon impact. Inside, she could make out the form of a man slumped over the steering wheel. With practiced movements, Sarah checked the door. Finding it unlocked, she carefully opened it, mindful of potential injuries. The acrid smell of burning rubber filled her nostrils as she leaned in to assess the driver. "Sir, can you hear me? I'm a nurse. I'm here to help," she said, gently placing 2 fingers on his neck to check for a pulse. It was there, weak, but present. The man groaned, slowly regaining consciousness. As Sarah began to carefully examine him for injuries, his eyes fluttered open, revealing a pair of striking blue irises clouded with confusion and pain. What happened?" he mumbled, attempting to move. "Try not to move, sir," Sarah instructed calmly. "You've been in an accident. Help is on the way. Can you tell me your name?" The man blinked, seeming to struggle with the question. "Michael," he finally said. "Michael Hartley." Sarah nodded encouragingly. "Good, Michael. I'm Sarah. I'm going to stay with you until the ambulance arrives, okay? Can you tell me if anything hurts?" As Michael began to respond, Sarah heard the welcome wail of approaching sirens. She breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that additional help was moments away. Little did she know that this chance encounter on a quiet morning in Millbrook would set in motion a chain of events that would not only change her life, but ripple out to touch the entire community. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Sarah stayed with Michael as the firefighters worked to safely extract him from the vehicle. She provided the paramedics with a concise report of his condition and watched as they loaded him into the ambulance, sirens blaring as they sped off towards St. Mary's, the very hospital she had just left. As the chaos subsided and the tow truck arrived to clear away the wreckage, Sarah found herself standing alone on the sidewalk, the events of the morning seeming almost surreal. A police officer approached, notepad in hand. "Ma'am, I understand you were first on the scene. Would you mind answering a few questions?" Sarah nodded, recounting the details of the accident and her interactions with Michael. As she spoke, she couldn't shake the image of those piercing blue eyes, filled with confusion and vulnerability. There had been something else there too, a profound loneliness that had struck her even in that brief encounter. After providing her statement, Sarah finally made her way home. Her small apartment welcomed her with blessed silence. She moved through her usual post-shift routine on autopilot, a quick shower, a light meal, and finally, blissful sleep. When Sarah awoke later that afternoon, the events of the morning came rushing back. She found herself wondering about Michael. Had he suffered any serious injuries? Did he have family to support him through his recovery? Driven by a mixture of professional concern and genuine curiosity, Sarah decided to inquire about Michael's condition during her next shift. She tried to convince herself it was simply due diligence. After all, she had been involved in his initial care. But deep down, she knew there was more to it. Something about the lost look in Michael's eyes had touched her, awakening a desire to ensure he was truly okay. As Sarah prepared for her evening shift, she reflected on the strange twist of fate that had put her in Michael's path. In her years as a nurse, she had learned that life could change in an instant, that strangers could become inexplicably important in the blink of an eye. Little did she know just how profound an impact this chance encounter would have, not just on her life, but on the entire fabric of Millbrook itself. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital hummed softly as Sarah made her way through the familiar corridors. Her inquiry about Michael Hartley led her to the third floor, where she found herself standing outside room 307. She hesitated for a moment, suddenly uncertain about the propriety of her visit. Was she overstepping some invisible boundary? Before she could talk herself out of it, the door opened, and a tall man in an expensive suit stepped out. He regarded Sarah with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone clipped and businesslike. Sarah straightened her shoulders. "I'm Sarah Matthews, one of the nurses who assisted at the scene of Mr. Hartley's accident. I just wanted to check on his condition." The man's expression softened slightly. "Ah, yes. Mr. Hartley mentioned someone had helped him before the paramedics arrived. I'm James Whitaker, Michael's personal assistant. He's resting now, but I'm sure he'd appreciate your concern. The doctors say he was lucky, some bruising and a mild concussion, but nothing more serious." Sarah nodded, relief washing over her. "That's good to hear. I won't disturb him then. Please, just let him know I stopped by." As she turned to leave, James called out, "Miss Matthews? Michael? He doesn't have many people who care about his well-being without an ulterior motive. Your kindness won't be forgotten." The words stayed with Sarah long after she left the hospital. As she went about her duties that night, her mind kept circling back to Michael Hartley and James's enigmatic statement. Who was this man, and why did he seem so isolated despite having a personal assistant and, presumably, the means for high-quality medical care? Over the next few days, Sarah found herself piecing together snippets of information about Michael Hartley. It turned out he was something of a local legend in Millbrook, a self-made millionaire who had built a tech company from the ground up. His business acumen was widely respected, but personally, he was known to be reclusive and somewhat cold. Sarah couldn't reconcile this image with the vulnerable man she'd encountered in the wreckage of his car. It made her wonder about the masks people wear and the assumptions we make about others based on reputation alone. A week after the accident, as Sarah was leaving the hospital after her shift, she was surprised to see a familiar figure standing near the entrance. Michael Hartley, looking somewhat pale but otherwise recovered, was engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with James. As Sarah approached, she caught fragments of their conversation. "Can't just ignore the board's concerns, Michael," James was saying. "The company needs your full attention right now." Michael's response was too low for Sarah to hear, but his frustration was evident in the set of his shoulders and the way he ran a hand through his hair. Unsure whether to interrupt, Sarah slowed her pace. But at that moment, Michael turned and saw her. A flicker of recognition passed over his face, followed by something that looked almost like relief. "Ms. Matthews," he called out, effectively ending his conversation with James. "I hoped I might run into you." Sarah approached, offering a warm smile. "Mr. Hartley, it's good to see you up and about. How are you feeling?" "Much better, thanks to you," Michael replied. "I wanted to thank you personally for your help that day. I'm told I owe you my life." Sarah shook her head. "I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Anyone would have done the same." A wry smile tugged at Michael's lips. "You'd be surprised," he murmured. Then, more brightly, "I was wondering if I might buy you a cup of coffee to express my gratitude properly." The invitation took Sarah by surprise. She glanced at James, who was watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Hartley, but unnecessary," Sarah began. "Please," Michael interrupted. "Call me Michael, and I insist. Unless, of course, you have other plans." Sarah hesitated, Her usual routine would have her heading home to her empty apartment, maybe watching some mindless TV before bed. And if she was honest with herself, she was intrigued by Michael Hartley and the contradictions he seemed to embody. "All right," she found herself saying, "coffee sounds lovely." As they walked towards a nearby cafe, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this simple act, accepting a cup of coffee from a grateful patient, was somehow momentous. She didn't yet realize that this conversation would be the catalyst for changes that would ripple through not just her life, but the entire community of Millbrook. The cafe was a cozy establishment tucked away on a side street, its warm lighting and soft jazz music a stark contrast to the sterile environment of the hospital. As they settled into a quiet corner booth, Sarah couldn't help but notice how out of place Michael looked in his tailored suit. Yet, there was something in his demeanor, a slight hesitancy, perhaps that made him seem more human, more approachable than his reputation suggested. "So, Ms. Matthews," Michael began, then caught himself. "Sarah, I hope you don't mind me using your first name?" Sarah shook her head, smiling. "Not at all. We did meet under rather informal circumstances, after all." A chuckle escaped Michael's lips, surprising them both. "That's certainly one way to put it." His expression grew more serious. "I meant what I said earlier. I owe you a great debt. If there's anything I can do to repay your kindness—" "Really, Michael," Sarah interrupted gently. "I was just doing my job. I'm just glad you're okay." Michael studied her for a moment, his blue eyes intense. "You know, in my line of work, I've grown accustomed to people always wanting something from me. It's refreshing to meet someone who seems genuinely uninterested in what I can offer." The statement hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Sarah felt a pang of sadness at the loneliness it suggested. "That sounds like a difficult way to live," she said softly. Michael's gaze dropped to his coffee cup. "It's the price of success, I suppose. But enough about me. Tell me about yourself, Sarah. What drove you to become a nurse?" As Sarah began to speak about her passion for healthcare and her desire to make a difference in people's lives, she noticed a change come over Michael. The guardedness in his eyes softened, replaced by genuine interest. He asked insightful questions, seeming truly engaged in learning about her work and the challenges she faced. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on topics ranging from the healthcare system to the changes they'd both seen in Millbrook over the years. Sarah found herself surprised by Michael's depth of knowledge and his thoughtful perspectives on community issues. As the evening wore on, Sarah glanced at her watch, startled to realize how much time had passed. "Oh, I should be going. Early shift tomorrow," she explained apologetically. Michael nodded, looking almost disappointed. "Of course. I've kept you far too long." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "I've enjoyed our conversation, Sarah. More than I expected to, if I'm honest. Would you be open to doing this again sometime?" The question caught Sarah off guard. She searched Michael's face, seeing not the wealthy businessman or the reclusive figure of local legend, but simply a man reaching out for connection. "I'd like that," she found herself saying. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Sarah felt a curious mix of emotions. There was the lingering warmth of good conversation, but also a sense of stepping into uncharted territory. Michael Hartley was unlike anyone she'd ever met, and she couldn't shake the feeling that their lives had become entangled in a way that would lead to unforeseen consequences. Walking home under the star-studded sky of Millbrook, Sarah reflected on the strange turns life could take. A week ago, Michael Hartley had been nothing more than a name she'd vaguely heard mentioned. Now, she felt as though she'd been granted a glimpse behind the carefully constructed facade of a man who, despite his wealth and success, seemed profoundly alone. Little did Sarah know that this evening was just the beginning. The ripples from their encounter would continue to spread, touching lives throughout Millbrook in ways neither of them could have anticipated. As she turned the key in her apartment door, Sarah couldn't have imagined the journey that lay ahead, a journey that would challenge her perceptions, test her values, and ultimately lead to transformations far beyond her own life. The following weeks saw a subtle shift in Sarah's routine. Her occasional coffee meetings with Michael became a regular occurrence, slotting into the spaces between her hospital shifts and his business commitments. Each encounter peeled back another layer of the complex man behind the public persona. Sarah learned of Michael's humble beginnings, of the driven young man who had sacrificed personal relationships in pursuit of his ambitions. She heard tales of triumphs and failures, of lessons learned the hard way. In turn, she shared stories from her own life, the challenges of her work, her dreams for the future, and her deep connection to the Millbrook community. As their friendship grew, so did the whispers around town. Millbrook was a small community, and the sight of the reclusive Michael Hartley engaged in animated conversation with the local nurse at the corner cafe did not go unnoticed. "Did you hear? Mrs. Thornton, the town gossip, whispered to her friend over the pharmacy counter. Michael Hartley's been seen all over town with that Matthews girl from the hospital. What do you suppose that's about?" Her friend shrugged, but her eyes gleamed with interest. "Who knows? But it's the most anyone's seen of him in years. Maybe she's good for him." The speculation was not limited to casual observers. At the hospital, Sarah's colleagues watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern as she rushed out after her shifts, clearly headed for another meeting with the town's most enigmatic resident. "Be careful, Sarah," her friend and fellow nurse Emily cautioned one day. "Men like that, they live in a different world. I just don't want to see you get hurt." Sarah appreciated her friend's concern, but she couldn't help feeling frustrated by the assumptions people seemed to be making. "It's not like that, Em," she insisted. "We're just friends. He's not what people think he is." But even as she said the words, Sarah felt a flicker of doubt. What exactly was developing between her and Michael? She couldn't deny the growing warmth she felt in his presence, the way her heart quickened when he smiled at her. Yet she was also acutely aware of the vast differences in their lives and experiences. For his part, Michael seemed oblivious to the town's gossip, or perhaps, Sarah mused, he was simply accustomed to being the subject of speculation. Their conversations rarely touched on the public's perception of their friendship, focusing instead on deeper, more personal topics. It was during one such conversation, as they walked through Millbrook's small but cherished park, that Michael first broached the subject that would set in motion the next phase of their journey. "You know, Sarah," he began, his tone thoughtful, "our talks have got me thinking about my life, my choices, and about this town." Sarah glanced at him curiously. "Oh, how so?" Michael was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "I've lived in Millbrook for years, but I've never really been part of it. I built my company here because it was convenient, but I never gave much thought to the community itself." He turned to Sarah, his expression earnest. "But seeing it through your eyes, caring about your work, the people you help, it's made me realize how disconnected I've been." Sarah felt a surge of warmth at his words. "It's never too late to change that," she offered gently. Michael nodded, a determined look crossing his face. "You're right, and I think I want to do just that. Change things, I mean." Sarah raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" Michael took a deep breath, as if steeling himself. "I've been thinking about using some of my resources to give back to Millbrook, not just writing a check, but really investing in the community, creating something that could make a lasting difference." As they continued their walk, Michael began to outline his ideas. He spoke of establishing a community center that could offer educational programs, health services, and support for local businesses. His eyes lit up as he described his vision, and Sarah found herself caught up in his enthusiasm. "That sounds incredible, Michael," she said, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Something like that could really transform lives here in Millbrook." Michael smiled, looking both excited and slightly nervous. "I was hoping you'd say that, because I was wondering, would you consider helping me with this project? Your insights into the community, your experience in healthcare, they'd be invaluable." Sarah's step faltered, surprised by the offer. "Me? I don't know anything about running a community center or managing big projects." "But you know people, Sarah," Michael insisted. "You understand what this community needs in a way I never could. We'd make a great team, your heart and my resources." As they reached the park's exit, Sarah found herself at a crossroads, both literally and figuratively. Michael's proposal was unexpected and daunting, yet undeniably exciting. It represented an opportunity to make a real difference in Millbrook, to help people on a scale she'd never imagined possible. But it also meant stepping into Michael's world, a world of wealth, influence, and public scrutiny. Was she ready for that? And what would it mean for their friendship, which had become so important to her? Can I think about it? Sarah asked finally, her voice soft. Michael nodded, his expression understanding. Of course. Take all the time you need. This would be a big commitment, and I want you to be sure. As they parted ways that evening, Sarah's mind was abuzz with conflicting thoughts and emotions. She couldn't help but feel that she stood on the brink of something life-changing, not just for her, but for all of Millbrook. What she didn't realize was that Michael's proposal was just the beginning. The journey they were about to embark on would challenge them both in ways they couldn't have anticipated, testing their newfound friendship, their values, and their understanding of what it truly means to make a difference in the world. As Sarah made her way home, the sun setting behind Millbrook's modest skyline, she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would dawn on a new chapter in her life, and in the life of the town she loved. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and introspection for Sarah. Michael's proposal had stirred up a mix of excitement, apprehension, and self-doubt. She found herself lying awake at night, weighing the potential impact of the community center against the enormous changes it would bring to her life. During her shifts at the hospital, Sarah's mind often wandered to the possibilities. She imagined a place where struggling families could find support, where children could access educational resources, where the elderly could gather for companionship. The thought of being part of something so transformative was exhilarating, but doubts crept in too. What did she really know about managing such a large-scale project? And how would her colleagues and friends react to her sudden association with Millbrook's most powerful resident? It was during a particularly hectic night shift that clarity finally came to Sarah. She had just finished treating a young boy with a severe asthma attack, a condition that proper preventive care could have managed. As she watched the child's relieved parents hugging him, a thought struck her with sudden force. If she had the power to prevent even one such incident, to improve even one life, didn't she have a responsibility to try? The next morning, exhausted but resolute, Sarah called Michael. "I'm in," she said simply when he answered. There was a moment of silence on the other end, then Michael's voice, tinged with both relief and excitement. "You sure?" "I am," Sarah confirmed, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "It won't be easy, and I have a lot to learn, but I want to do this. I want to help make a difference." Michael's enthusiasm was palpable. "That's wonderful, Sarah. Truly. I can't tell you how much it means to have you on board. We'll take it one step at a time, I promise." As Sarah hung up the phone, she felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she also felt, for the first time in a long while, that she was embarking on something truly meaningful. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Sarah and Michael threw themselves into the initial planning stages of the community center project. They spent long evenings poring over reports, consulting with experts, and brainstorming ideas. Sarah was impressed by Michael's dedication and attention to detail. She had always known he was intelligent, but seeing him in his element, strategizing, problem-solving, and negotiating, gave her a new appreciation for his skills. For his part, Michael found Sarah's insights invaluable. Her deep understanding of the community's needs and her compassionate approach to problem-solving brought a human element to the project that he realized had been missing from much of his previous work. As word of the project began to spread through Millbrook, reactions were mixed. Many were excited about the prospect of a new community resource and the investment in the town. Others were more skeptical, questioning Michael's motives and Sarah's involvement. The whispers that had followed their friendship now grew louder. Some praised Sarah for using her influence with Michael for the good of the town. Others speculated about a romantic involvement, questioning whether Sarah was being used as a public relations tool. Sarah tried her best to ignore the gossip, focusing instead on the work at hand. But there were moments when the weight of public scrutiny felt overwhelming. It was during one such moment, as they sat surrounded by blueprints and budget reports in Michael's home office, that Sarah finally voiced her concerns. "Michael," she began hesitantly, "are you sure I'm the right person for this? I mean, I'm not an expert in any of this, and people are talking. What if I'm just complicating things for you?" Michael set down the document he'd been reviewing, his expression serious. "Sarah, listen to me. You are exactly the right person for this project. Your compassion, your insight, your dedication, these are things that can't be taught or bought. As for what people are saying," he paused, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his face. "I won't pretend it doesn't bother me, but I've learned that there will always be talk, no matter what we do. What matters is that we know why we're doing this, and that we believe in it." His words settled over Sarah like a warm blanket, reassuring and strengthening her resolve. She nodded, offering a small smile. "You're right. I'm sorry for doubting. It's just, all of this is so new to me." Michael returned her smile, reaching out to squeeze her hand gently. "It's new for me too, in many ways. But we're in this together. Partners." "Partners," Sarah agreed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. As they turned back to their work, neither Sarah nor Michael fully realized the extent to which their lives had become intertwined. Were the challenges that lay ahead? The community center project was more than just a philanthropic endeavor. It was the beginning of a journey that would test their friendship, their values, and their understanding of what it truly means to create change in the world. The sun was setting over Millbrook as they continued their planning, casting a warm glow through the office windows. It seemed to Sarah a fitting metaphor for this new chapter in her life. The familiar landscape of her hometown bathed in a new light, full of promise and possibility. Little did she know that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with unexpected twists, difficult choices, and moments of both triumph and doubt. But in that moment, working side by side with Michael, Sarah felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, driven by the hope of making a real difference in the lives of those around her. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity for Sarah and Michael. As their vision for the community center began to take shape, they found themselves navigating a complex web of bureaucracy, negotiations, and public relations. Sarah's life had transformed almost overnight. She had reduced her hours at the hospital to part-time, dedicating the rest of her energy to the project. Her days were now filled with meetings, with city officials, potential partners, and community leaders. It was a far cry from the familiar routine of hospital rounds and patient care, and there were moments when Sarah felt completely out of her depth. But for every moment of doubt, there was a corresponding rush of excitement. Sarah watched in awe as their plans moved from abstract ideas to concrete actions. The site for the community center had been chosen, an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, which would be renovated and expanded. Architects had been hired, permits were being processed, and a timeline was taking shape. Michael, too, seemed transformed by the project. Sarah noticed a new energy about him, a sense of purpose that went beyond the pursuit of profit. He threw himself into the work with a passion that surprised even those who had known him for years. As the day of the groundbreaking ceremony approached, the buzz around Millbrook reached a fever pitch. Local news outlets ran stories about the project, featuring interviews with Sarah and Michael. Their faces smiled from the front page of the Millbrook Gazette. Under the headline, "Local nurse and business tycoon join forces for community good." The morning of the ceremony dawned bright and clear. Sarah stood before her mirror, adjusting her outfit nervously. She had chosen a simple, professional dress, a far cry from her usual scrubs. As she applied a touch of lipstick, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. A knock at her door startled her from her reverie. She opened it to find Michael standing there, looking dapper in a well-tailored suit. "Ready for the big day?" he asked, his smile a mix of excitement and nerves. Sarah took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Michael, what if I mess up my speech? What if people don't believe in what we're trying to do?" Michael's expression softened. He reached out, gently squeezing her shoulder. "Sarah, you're the heart of this project. Just speak from that heart, and people will listen. Remember why we're doing this." His words calmed her, as they so often did. She nodded, managing a smile. "You're right. Let's do this." The groundbreaking site was a hive of activity when they arrived. A stage had been set up, facing rows of chairs that were quickly filling with townspeople, local officials, and media representatives. Sarah's heart raced as she saw the size of the crowd. As they made their way to the stage, Sarah caught snippets of conversation from the audience. "Can't believe they're actually going through with it." About time someone invested in this part of town. Wonder what's really going on between those two? Sarah pushed the comments from her mind, focusing instead on the task at hand. As she took her place at the podium, looking out over the sea of faces, she felt a sudden calm settle over her. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "Today, we're not just breaking ground on a building. We're breaking ground on a new future for Millbrook." As Sarah spoke about their vision for the community center, the programs it would offer, the lives it could change, she saw heads nodding, faces lighting up with interest and hope. She spoke of her experiences as a nurse, of the needs she'd seen in the community, and of her belief that together they could make a real difference. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Sarah stepped back, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of relief and exhilaration. Michael took the podium next, his speech focusing on the economic benefits the center would bring to the area, the jobs it would create, and his commitment to Millbrook's future. As they stood together, ceremonial shovels in hand, ready to turn the first bit of earth, Sarah felt a swell of emotion. This moment, this project, represented so much more than she could have imagined when she first met Michael on that fateful morning. The cameras flashed as they dug the shovels into the ground. In that moment, Sarah felt as though they were not just breaking ground on a building, but on a new chapter in both their lives and the life of Millbrook itself. As the ceremony concluded and they began to mingle with the attendees, Sarah caught Michael's eye across the crowd. He gave her a small nod and a smile that spoke volumes: pride, gratitude, and a shared sense of purpose. What neither of them realized, as they basked in the glow of this initial success, was that the real challenges were yet to come. The groundbreaking was just the beginning. The path ahead would test their resolve, their partnership, and their vision in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But for now, as the autumn sun shone down on the bustling site, the future seemed bright with possibility. Sarah allowed herself a moment to savor the feeling, knowing that tomorrow would bring new tasks, new obstacles, and new opportunities to make a difference in the lives of those around her. As she shook hands and answered questions from excited community members, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on how far she'd come from that night shift nurse who had chanced upon an accident. Life, she mused, had a funny way of taking unexpected turns, and sometimes those turns led to the most extraordinary journeys. As the weeks turned into months, the community center project began to take shape, both figuratively and literally. The old warehouse was slowly transforming, its drab exterior giving way to a modern, welcoming facade. Inside, walls were being erected, creating spaces that would soon house classrooms, a health clinic, a job training center, and more. For Sarah, each day brought new challenges and learning experiences. She found herself juggling responsibilities she never could have imagined, from coordinating with contractors to negotiating with potential program partners. Her medical knowledge came in handy as they planned the health clinic, but much of the work was entirely new territory. Michael proved to be a patient teacher, guiding Sarah through the intricacies of project management and business negotiations. She, in turn, brought a human touch to their dealings, her genuine care for the community shining through in every interaction. Their partnership strengthened as they navigated the complexities of bringing their vision to life. Late nights poring over budgets and blueprints often turned into deep conversations about their hopes for the project and their own personal growth. But as the project progressed, so did the challenges. Cost overruns began to plague the construction, forcing difficult decisions about where to cut back. Sarah found herself in heated debates with Michael over priorities, her focus on maximizing services sometimes clashing with his need to keep the project financially viable. One particularly tense evening, as they argued over whether to reduce the size of the health clinic to accommodate a more extensive job training program, Sarah felt her frustration boiling over. "Michael, we can't cut back on healthcare. These people need access to basic medical services. It's not just about job training." Michael ran a hand through his hair, his own frustration evident. "Sarah, I understand that, but we have to be realistic. If we can't make this center financially sustainable, it won't be able to help anyone in the long run." Their voices had risen, echoing in the empty construction site where they stood. As they glared at each other, the sound of someone clearing their throat made them both turn. An older woman stood nearby, watching them with a mixture of amusement and concern. Sarah recognized her as Mrs. Henderson, a long-time resident of the neighborhood. "Excuse me," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice gentle but firm. "I couldn't help overhearing. If you two don't mind an old woman's opinion, I think you're both right." Sarah and Michael exchanged surprised glances as Mrs. Henderson continued. "We do need health care, desperately so. But we also need jobs and hope for a better future. Maybe instead of choosing one over the other, you could find a way to make them work together." Her words hung in the air, cutting through the tension. Sarah felt a wave of shame wash over her. They had been so caught up in their own perspectives that they'd lost sight of the bigger picture. Michael was the first to speak. "Mrs. Henderson, you're absolutely right. Thank you for the reminder." He turned to Sarah, his expression softening. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I got too focused on the numbers. Let's take a step back and find a solution that works for everyone." Sarah nodded, offering a small smile. "I'm sorry too. We're supposed to be partners in this. Let's figure it out together." As Mrs. Henderson excused herself, looking pleased, Sarah and Michael settled onto a stack of lumber, their earlier argument forgotten as they began to brainstorm new approaches. This incident marked a turning point in their partnership. They learned to balance each other's strengths and weaknesses, to challenge each other constructively, and to always keep the community's needs at the forefront of their decisions. As word of their project spread, it began to attract attention beyond Millbrook. Regional news outlets picked up the story, praising the innovative approach to community development. With the increased visibility came new opportunities and new pressures. Potential donors began to show interest, offering much-needed funds but also bringing their own agendas and expectations. Sarah and Michael found themselves navigating a complex web of relationships, trying to balance the influx of resources with their original vision for the center. One particularly generous offer came from a large pharmaceutical company, eager to sponsor the health clinic. Their proposal would provide state-of-the-art equipment and subsidized medications, but it also came with strings attached, prominent branding throughout the clinic and a say in its operational policies. The offer sparked intense debate between Sarah and Michael. Sarah was wary of corporate influence in healthcare, concerned about the long-term implications for patient care and accessibility. Michael saw the practical benefits, top-notch facilities that could serve more people than they had originally planned. Their discussion spilled over into a community meeting, where local residents voiced their own mixed feelings about the offer. Some were excited about the prospect of advanced medical care in their neighborhood, while others shared Sarah's concerns about corporate involvement. As the meeting grew heated, Sarah found herself standing up, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "I understand the appeal of this offer," she began, looking around the room, "but we started this project to serve this community, not corporate interests. If we compromise our values now, what's to stop us from losing sight of our mission entirely?" Her words resonated with many in the room, but she could see the conflicted looks on some faces. The promise of top-tier healthcare was tempting, especially in a community that had been underserved for so long. Michael watched Sarah with a mixture of pride and concern. He admired her principles, but worried about the practical implications of turning down such a significant offer. As the meeting concluded without a clear consensus, he pulled Sarah aside. "You made some valid points in there," he said quietly. "But Sarah, we need to be realistic. Without funding like this, we might not be able to offer half of what we've promised." Sarah sighed, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. "I know, Michael, but at what cost? Once we start down this road, where does it end?" They stood in silence for a moment, both acutely aware of the magnitude of the choice before them. It wasn't just about this one offer. It was about the very nature of the project they were building and the legacy they wanted to leave. "Let's sleep on it," Michael finally suggested. "Tomorrow, we'll sit down and figure out a way forward that we can both feel good about." As Sarah made her way home that night, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She thought about the community members who had shared their hopes and fears at the meeting, about the potential of the center to change lives, and about the fine line between compromise and selling out. She also thought about her partnership with Michael. Despite their differences, she had come to deeply value his perspective and his commitment to the project. They had come so far together, overcoming countless obstacles. Surely they could find a way through this challenge as well. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, a new day full of possibility. As Sarah prepared for her meeting with Michael, she felt a renewed sense of determination. They had started this journey with a shared vision of making a real difference in Millbrook. Whatever solution they found, she was determined that it would stay true to that original purpose. Little did Sarah know that the decision they would make that day would have far-reaching consequences, not just for the community center, but for their partnership and for the entire town of Millbrook. As she stepped out into the morning sunlight, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah couldn't have imagined the twists and turns that were yet to come in their journey. The community center project, born out of a chance encounter and a shared dream, was about to enter a new phase, one that would test their resolve, challenge their principles, and ultimately reshape the future of Millbrook in ways they had never anticipated. The morning air was crisp as Sarah made her way to Michael's office. The familiar path she'd walked so many times over the past months felt different today, weighted with the importance of the decision that lay ahead. As she entered the building, Sarah's mind raced with potential solutions, each one a delicate balance between idealism and practicality. She found Michael already in his office, a spread of papers before him and a thoughtful frown on his face. "Good morning," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "Did you get any sleep last night?" Michael offered a wry smile. "About as much as you did, I'd guess." He pushed a cup of coffee toward her. He'd clearly anticipated her arrival. "I've been running the numbers all morning, Sarah. I think I might have a compromise that could work." Over the next hour, they pored over Michael's proposal. It was a complex plan that involved accepting a portion of the pharmaceutical company's offer while maintaining strict controls over branding and operational independence. Additionally, it proposed seeking matching funds from local businesses and community members to dilute the corporate influence. "It's not perfect," Michael admitted, "but it could allow us to build the clinic we envisioned without compromising our core values." Sarah studied the proposal, her medical training allowing her to spot potential issues and advantages that might have escaped Michael's notice. It was a delicate balance, but she had to admit it was thoughtfully constructed. "It could work," she said slowly, "but we'd need to be vigilant about maintaining our independence, and we'd need to be completely transparent with the community about where the funding is coming from and how decisions are being made." Michael nodded, relief evident in his eyes. "Absolutely. Transparency has to be our top priority. We'll hold regular community meetings, publish all our financial reports, whatever it takes to maintain trust." As they continued to refine the plan, Sarah felt a renewed sense of partnership with Michael. Despite their different approaches, their shared commitment to the project and to Millbrook itself always brought them back to common ground. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity as they put their compromise into action. They held town halls to explain the funding structure to the community, met with local business leaders to secure additional support, and negotiated tirelessly with the pharmaceutical company to ensure the terms of their involvement were clear and limited. It was exhausting work, but as Sarah watched their vision slowly becoming reality, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The community center was no longer just a dream. It was taking shape before her eyes, a testament to what could be achieved when people came together for a common cause. However, as the project progressed, Sarah began to notice subtle changes in Michael. The long hours and constant pressure seemed to be taking a toll on her. She caught glimpses of the old Michael, the isolated, business-focused man she'd first met, peeking through his newfound warmth and community spirit. One evening, as they were leaving yet another meeting, Sarah decided to broach the subject. "Michael, is everything okay? You seem, I don't know, distant lately." Michael was quiet for a moment as they walked to their chorus. When he spoke, his voice was tinged with a weariness Sarah hadn't heard in months. "It's just all of this. The constant scrutiny, the endless compromises. Sometimes I wonder if we're really making a difference, or if we're just—" He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Sarah's heart ached at the doubt in his voice. She stopped walking and turned to face him. "Michael, look around you. See that building over there?" She pointed to the half-constructed community center. "That's making a difference. The families who will have access to healthcare, the kids who will have a safe place to learn and grow. That's all because of what we're doing here." Michael's eyes followed her gesture, a flicker of the old enthusiasm returning to his face. "You're right, of course. It's just easy to lose sight of the big picture sometimes. Sarah nodded, understanding all too well. That's why we're partners in this, remember? To remind each other why we started this journey in the first place. As they parted ways that evening, Sarah couldn't shake a nagging worry. She had seen firsthand how the pressures of the business world had shaped Michael before. Would the challenges of this project push him back into old patterns? Or would their shared vision and the tangible impact they were making be enough to keep him grounded? What Sarah didn't realize was that Michael's doubts were just the beginning. The coming months would bring challenges that would test not only their partnership, but also their individual convictions in the very foundation of the community they were trying to build. As she drove home under the starlit sky of Millbrook, Sarah couldn't have imagined the storms that lay ahead, but she also couldn't have known the strength and resilience she would discover within herself, within Michael, and within the community they had brought together. The Community Center project, born from a chance encounter and nurtured by their shared dream, was about to enter its most critical phase. It would be a time of difficult choices, unexpected alliances, and profound personal growth. A time that would ultimately define not just the future of their project, but the future of Millbrook itself. As the community center neared completion, a new challenge emerged from an unexpected quarter. Millbrook's mayor, Jonathan Blackwood, who had initially been supportive of the project, began to express concerns about its impact on the town. Sarah first heard the rumblings at a town council meeting she'd attended to give an update on the center's progress. Mayor Blackwood, usually a jovial presence, seemed uncharacteristically stern as he raised questions about increased traffic, potential strain on local resources, and the long-term financial viability of the center. Confused and a little hurt by the sudden skepticism, Sarah sought out the mayor after the meeting. "Mayor Blackwood, I thought you were on board with the community center. Has something changed?" The mayor's expression was a mixture of discomfort and resignation. "Sarah, you have to understand, this project of yours, while well-intentioned, is causing ripples. Some of our more influential residents are concerned about how it might change the character of Millbrook." Sarah felt a surge of indignation. Change the character? By providing health care and education to those who need it most? Mayor Blackwood held up a placating hand. "I'm just relaying the concerns that have been brought to me. As mayor, I have to consider all perspectives." As Sarah relayed this conversation to Michael later that evening, she could see the gears turning in his head. The businessman in him understood the political maneuvering at play, even as the part of him that had grown to care deeply about the project bristled at the opposition. "We need to get ahead of this," Michael said, his voice taking on the sharp focus Sarah recognized from their most challenging moments. "Set up meetings with these influential residents. Hear their concerns directly. Maybe we can find a way to address them without compromising our mission." Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Michael found themselves in a whirlwind of meetings and negotiations. They sat across polished conference tables from Millbrook's elite. Old money families, successful business owners, and political players. The concerns varied. Some worried about property values, others about changing demographics, and a few seemed simply resistant to any kind of change in their quiet town. Sarah found these meetings deeply frustrating. She struggled to maintain her composure in the face of what often felt like thinly veiled classism and fear-mongering. More than once, she had to excuse herself to cool down, leaving Michael to smooth ruffled feathers with his practiced charm. It was after one such meeting, as they sat in Michael's car in silence, that Sarah finally voiced the fear that had been growing in her heart. "Michael, what if we can't overcome this? What if, after everything we've done, they managed to shut us down?" Michael was quiet for a long moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly even though the car wasn't moving. When he spoke, his voice was low and intense. "Sarah, do you remember why we started this? It wasn't for the approval of Millbrook's elite. It was for the single mother working 2 jobs who can't afford health care for her kids. It was for the laid-off factory worker who needs job training to start a new career. It was for the elderly couple who need a place to socialize and stay active." He turned to face her, his eyes blazing with a determination that took Sarah's breath away. "We're not going to let them shut us down. We're going to fight for this, whatever it takes." Sarah felt a surge of emotion, gratitude for Michael's unwavering commitment, and a renewed sense of purpose. She nodded, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "You're right. We've come too far to give up now. As they drove back to the community center, they began to formulate a plan. They would need to rally their supporters, to remind the town of the good the center would do. They would need to be strategic, addressing valid concerns while standing firm against baseless fears. What they didn't realize was that this opposition would push their partnership to its limits. The coming weeks would see them facing not just external challenges, but internal conflicts as their different approaches to problem-solving clashed under the mounting pressure. Sarah, driven by her deep empathy and commitment to social justice, would find herself drawn to more direct, confrontational tactics. Michael, with his business acumen and understanding of political maneuvering, would advocate for a more diplomatic approach. Their disagreements would spill over into their personal relationship, testing the bonds of friendship and trust they had built. There would be heated arguments, moments of doubt, and times when both would question whether they were truly cut out for this fight. But through it all, the community center itself would stand as a testament to what they had already achieved. As the final touches were put in place, the classrooms equipped, the clinic stocked, the job training center readied, Sarah and Michael would find themselves returning again and again to the physical reminder of their shared vision, and they wouldn't be alone in this fight. The very community they sought to serve would rally around them, offering support in ways both big and small. From local volunteers offering their time and skills to unexpected allies emerging from unlikely places, Sarah and Michael would discover that their project had touched more lives and inspired more hope than they had ever imagined. As the sun set on Millbrook that evening, casting long shadows across the nearly completed community center, Sarah and Michael stood side by side, surveying the fruits of their labor. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges they were only beginning to understand. But in that moment, watching the last rays of sunlight glint off the center's windows, they shared a silent renewal of their commitment to each other, to their vision, and to the community that had become so much more than just a place they lived. Little did they know that the true test of their resolve and the ultimate fate of their dream still lay ahead. The coming storm would shake the very foundations of Millbrook, forcing everyone, from the town's most powerful to its most vulnerable, to confront their values and decide what kind of community they truly wanted to be. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity as Sarah and Michael threw themselves into their campaign to save the community center. They organized town halls, distributed flyers, and met with anyone who would listen to their case. Their days were long, often stretching late into the night as they strategized and planned. Sarah found herself speaking at church gatherings, PTA meetings, and even impromptu assemblies in local parks. Her natural warmth and genuine passion for the project shone through, winning over many who had been on the fence. She shared stories of the people the center would help, the single mother who could finally get preventative care for her children, the unemployed worker who would have a chance to learn new skills, the lonely senior who would find companionship and purpose. Michael, meanwhile, leveraged his business connections and negotiation skills. He met with local business leaders, emphasizing the economic benefits the center would bring to Millbrook. He poured over budgets and projections, ensuring that every concern about the center's financial viability could be addressed with hard data. But as they fought to keep their dream alive, cracks began to appear in their united front. Sarah, fueled by her deep empathy for those the center would serve, often pushed for more aggressive tactics. She wanted to call out the opposition directly, to challenge what she saw as thinly veiled prejudice and selfishness. Michael, drawing on years of corporate experience, advocated for a more measured approach. He worried that direct confrontation would only entrench their opponents and alienate potential supporters. His focus was on building bridges, finding compromises that could satisfy all parties without sacrificing the core mission of the center. Their disagreements came to a head one evening, as they were preparing for a crucial town council meeting. Sarah had drafted a speech that pulled no punches, directly accusing some council members of prioritizing the interests of the wealthy over the needs of the community. "Sarah, we can't use this," Michael said, his voice tight with frustration. "It's too confrontational. We'll lose any chance of winning them over." Sarah felt her temper flare. "Win them over? Michael, these people have made it clear they don't care about the people we're trying to help. Why should we tiptoe around their feelings?" "Because, like it or not, we need their support to make this happen," Michael shot back. "This isn't just about being right, it's about being effective. Their voices had risen, echoing in the empty community center where they stood. For a moment, they glared at each other, the tension palpable. It was Sarah who broke the silence, her voice softer but still firm. "Michael, I understand what you're saying, but at what point do we compromise so much that we lose sight of why we started this in the first place?" Michael's expression softened. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Sarah had come to recognize as a sign of his inner conflict. "I hear you, Sarah. I do. But we have to be smart about this. If we burn all our bridges now, we might not get another chance. We need to find a way to stand firm on our principles without alienating everyone who disagrees with us." Sarah sighed, the fire of her anger dimming but not extinguished. "I know you're right. It's hard to stay calm when I think about all the people counting on us. But you're right, we need to be strategic." They spent the next few hours reworking the speech, finding a balance between passion and diplomacy. As they worked, the tension between them gradually eased, replaced by the familiar rhythm of collaboration that had brought them this far. The town council meeting the next evening was a turning point. The community center's supporters turned out in force, filling the chamber to capacity. Sarah and Michael presented their case, addressing concerns with patience and transparency while never wavering from their core mission. To their surprise, several unexpected allies emerged. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who had mediated their argument months ago, spoke movingly about how the center would change lives in her neighborhood. The owner of a local diner shared how the job training program would help him find skilled workers. Even a few of the influential residents who had initially opposed the project stood up to voice their change of heart. As the meeting concluded, it was clear that the tide of public opinion had shifted in their favor. The council agreed to continue supporting the project, with a few minor concessions that Sarah and Michael had prepared for. Walking out of the town hall that night, Sarah felt a mix of exhaustion and elation. "We did it," she said softly, almost in disbelief. Michael nodded, a tired smile on his face. "We did, but this is just the beginning. Now we have to prove that all our promises weren't just talk." Sarah knew he was right. Winning the right to keep the center open was one thing. Making it a success that truly transformed lives would be another challenge entirely. But in that moment, basking in the glow of their hard-fought victory, she felt ready to face whatever came next. As they parted ways that night, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. From that chance encounter on a dark road to this moment of triumph, their journey had been full of unexpected twists and turns. Their partnership, tested by conflict and strengthened by shared purpose, had become something she treasured deeply. What Sarah didn't realize was that the greatest test of that partnership was yet to come. The months ahead would bring challenges that would shake the very foundation of everything they had built together. The community center would face threats from unexpected quarters, and Sarah and Michael would be forced to confront not just external opposition, but their own evolving feelings and priorities. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Sarah's dreams were filled with images of the community center bustling with activity, lives being changed, and a future bright with possibility. She couldn't have known that those dreams would soon be threatened by a storm brewing on the horizon, a storm that would force her to question everything she thought she knew about herself, about Michael, and about the true cost of making a difference in the world. The dawn of a new day in Millbrook brought with it the promise of change, but also the looming specter of unforeseen challenges. Sarah and Michael's journey, already transformative, was about to enter its most critical and defining phase. The months following the town council meeting were a whirlwind of activity as Sarah and Michael worked tirelessly to bring the community center to life. The building, once an abandoned warehouse, now stood as a beacon of hope in the heart of Millbrook. Its doors opened to a flurry of excitement, with community members of all ages flooding in to explore the new facilities. Sarah found herself constantly amazed by the impact they were already making. She watched as children's eyes lit up in the new library, as unemployed workers gained new skills in the job training center, and as elderly residents found companionship in the social programs. Each day brought new stories of lives touched and horizons broadened. Michael, too, seemed reinvigorated by the center's success. He threw himself into expanding their programs, leveraging his business acumen to secure additional funding and partnerships. His network of contacts, once used primarily for corporate gain, now became a powerful tool for community development. However, as the center flourished, Sarah began to notice subtle changes in their dynamic. The long hours and constant demands of running the center meant they were spending more time together than ever, but somehow, Sarah felt a growing distance between them. There were moments when she caught Michael looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, only for him to quickly look away when their eyes met. One evening, as they were closing up the center after a particularly successful community event, Sarah decided to broach the subject. "Michael, is everything okay? You seem, I don't know, distracted lately." Michael was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the center's logo emblazoned on the wall. When he spoke, his voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. "Sarah, I've been doing a lot of thinking. About the center, about Millbrook, about us." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. "Us?" Michael turned to face her, his expression a mix of vulnerability and determination. "This journey we've been on, it's changed me in ways I never expected. Working with you, seeing the impact we're making, it's made me realize what's truly important in life." He took a deep breath before continuing. "Sarah, I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Sarah felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She had always valued Michael's friendship, had even felt moments of attraction, but love? The idea both thrilled and terrified her. "Michael, she began, but found herself at a loss for words. Sensing her hesitation, Michael quickly added, "I don't expect you to feel the same way. I needed you to know. Whatever happens, I want you to know that working with you on this project has been the most meaningful experience of my life." Sarah's mind was reeling. She thought of all they'd been through together, the partnership they'd built, the dreams they shared. But she also thought of the complexities it would add to their work, the potential risks to the center if things went wrong. "I need some time to think," she finally managed to say. It's a lot to process." Michael nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. Take all the time you need. Nothing has to change if you don't want it to." As Sarah drove home that night, her thoughts were a jumbled mess of emotions and practicalities. She couldn't deny that there was a part of her that had always been drawn to Michael, that had seen glimpses of the man behind the businessman and been intrigued. But was it love? And even if it was, could they risk the future of the center for a personal relationship? The following weeks were a delicate dance of stolen glances and carefully maintained professionalism. Sarah threw herself into her work at the center, using the busy schedule as a buffer against the need to confront her feelings. Michael, true to his word, didn't press the issue, but Sarah could feel the weight of his unspoken hopes in every interaction. It was during this period of emotional turmoil that a new challenge arose, one that would force Sarah and Michael to confront not just their feelings for each other, but their very vision for the future of Millbrook. News broke that a large corporation was eyeing Millbrook for a major development project. The proposal promised hundreds of jobs and a significant boost to the local economy, but it also threatened to change the character of the town irrevocably. The planned development would encroach on green spaces, potentially displace longtime residents, and bring an influx of new people that could overwhelm the town's infrastructure. The community was divided. Many saw the potential for economic growth and welcomed the change. Others, particularly those who had come to rely on the community center and its services, feared being priced out of their own town. Sarah and Michael found themselves at the center of the debate. The community looked to them for guidance, but for the first time since they'd begun their partnership, they found themselves on opposite sides of an issue. Michael, drawing on his business background, saw the potential benefits of the development. He argued that with proper planning, they could leverage the influx of resources to expand the center's services and reach even more people in need. Sarah, however, was deeply concerned about the human cost of such rapid change. She worried about the most vulnerable members of their community being left behind in the name of progress. As they stood on the brink of this new challenge, Sarah realized that her decision about her feelings for Michael couldn't be separated from their vision for Millbrook's future. The personal and the public had become inexorably intertwined. With the fate of the town hanging in the balance and her heart pulled in conflicting directions, Sarah knew that the choices she made in the coming days would shape not just her own future, but the future of everything she and Michael had worked so hard to build. As the sun set on Millbrook that evening, casting long shadows across the community center they had poured their hearts into, Sarah steeled herself for the difficult conversations and decisions that lay ahead. Whatever the outcome, she knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The proposed development became the talk of Millbrook, dominating conversations in cafes, at school gates, and in the bustling halls of the community center. Sarah found herself at the heart of these discussions, listening to impassioned arguments from both sides. She heard from young families excited about new job opportunities, from environmental activists concerned about the impact on local ecosystems, and from longtime residents worried about losing the town's close-knit feel. Each voice added another layer of complexity to an already challenging situation. Michael, meanwhile, had thrown himself into researching the development proposal. He pored over economic projections, environmental impact studies, and urban planning documents. Sarah watched as he applied the same intensity and focus that had made him a successful businessman to understanding every facet of the potential change coming to Millbrook.